to lure the British Air Force into combat. But Britain's Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding refused to take the bait. He used his fighters sparingly, knowing that the real battle was still to come. As this first phase of the Battle of Britain began, the Luftwaffe had a massive superiority in numbers. It had 1,100 single-engine fighters available to the Royal Air Force's 700. Almost all the German fighters were the excellent Messerschmitt Bf 109E, with a top speed of around 350 miles an hour. About two-thirds of the British fighters were Hawker Hurricanes, slower than the 109s but more agile. The remainder were Supermarine Spitfires, with a top speed similar to the 109s. For their assault, the Germans had over 1,300 medium bombers, Dornier Do-17s, Heinkel HE-111s and Junkers Ju-88s, each carrying about 4,000 pounds of bombs. Goering selected August the 13th as Adlertag, Eagle Day, for the start of his main assault. His aim was to destroy RAF fighters in the air and the RAF's airfields and Britain's aircraft factories. Softening up attacks were made the day before. These concentrated on the airfields and the radar towers along the south coast. One station on the Isle of Wight was put out of action, and several were damaged, but these were working again within hours. Goering did not believe that radar had a significant role to play in the battle, and so these attacks were not repeated. It was a big mistake. Adlertag dawned cloudy, so the main assault was postponed until the afternoon. When it came, radar gave ample warning.
Bowmass calling. Planes heard 3 miles southwest.
Nonetheless, most of the RAF airfields in the south were hammered. But by the end of the day, none had been put out of action. The Luftwaffe lost 46 aircraft. Britain, just 13. The battle continued with equal ferocity over the next few days. Both sides became increasingly exhausted. Dowding tried to rotate his pilots to rest them, but he simply did not have enough of it. Many were being sent into battle with just 10 hours flying experience. The Luftwaffe was suffering too. Its pilots were shocked and increasingly demoralized by the resilience of the British. The RAF fighters always seemed to be waiting for them. As the fighting wore on for 12 solid days, the British losses began to creep up to match those of the Germans. The Royal Air Force was close to breaking. To turn the screw, Goering began using his bombers to attack at night as well. But this decision had an unexpected outcome. On the night of August the 24th, a flight of Heinkel bombers lost its way and bombed the city of London. It was the first attack on a non-military target. The next night, 81 British bombers responded by raiding Berlin. Hitler was infuriated and demanded massive retaliation. This came on the evening of September the 7th. German bombers attacked the London docks and surrounding areas. More than 450 people died and thousands of homes were destroyed. But in fact, this was Goering's second crucial mistake. By switching from the RAF's airfields just at the moment when it seemed about to break, he gave it the respite it needed. Had Goering continued to attack the airfields, the RAF could not have continued to defend the skies. Instead, on September the 15th, British radars picked up another massive assault on London. The first wave of 100 bombers and 400 fighters was intercepted. Fighting raged all the way from the coast. In the afternoon, another fleet of 150 bombers renewed the attack. Winston Churchill was at Fighter Command headquarters that day. After he heard controllers calling in reinforcements from neighbouring groups, he asked, "What other reserves have we got?" The reply was, "There are none." But it was obvious that the Luftwaffe had failed to gain control of the air. And on September the 17th, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion. The Battle of Britain did not really end, it died away. Hitler now tried a new tactic. By October the 5th, the daylight raids stopped, and the Germans concentrated on bombing Britain's cities by night. This was a so-called blitz. London was attacked every night but one, up to November the 12th. On November the 10th, the centre of the city of Coventry was obliterated. The blitz continued into 1941, with the last major raid being made on London on the night of May the 10th. More than 50,000 civilians were killed in the Blitz, but there was never any question of Britain cracking. But for Hitler, this was no more than an irritating setback. Britain, he was convinced, could never be a serious threat, so he now turned to Eastern Europe. For Britain, there was now a chance to rebuild with a view one day to taking the fight to the enemy. But to do that, Churchill would need help. Britain may have won the Battle of Britain, but it was still immensely vulnerable. Night after night, its cities were hammered by the Nazis' blitz. Its supply lifelines at sea were under constant assault. Churchill needed more help. And there was only one country that could provide it: the United States. By 1940, the US had recovered from the Great Depression and the economy was booming again. It had immense reserves of manpower and unrivaled industrial strength. But the people of the United States were utterly opposed to becoming involved yet again in Europe's wars. In July 1940, a poll showed that only 8% of them were willing to enter the war. Undeterred, Churchill lobbied the US President, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt had long admired Churchill for his outspokenly anti-Nazi views, and the two men shared an interest in naval affairs. Roosevelt had been Undersecretary for the US Navy in 1917. After he became president, Roosevelt kept in touch with Churchill. The two began a correspondence, Churchill signing himself former naval person. For all his avuncular image, Roosevelt had no illusions that German aggression would one day suck America into the war. So he began the long job of preparing American public opinion.
I am a pacifist, but I believe you and I will act together to protect and to defend our science, our culture, our American freedom, and our civilization.
In July 1940, he got approval for a massive expansion of the US Navy, including the building of 6 large battleships and a new class of aircraft carriers.